Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, four nerds by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy is Ted.
And today we're talking about Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. We're going to be delving into Chapter 2, Elves.
Jump down the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with us.
While you're down there, you'll also find a link to Amazon where you can find your own link to pick up Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. Help supports the channel as well. So, we're diving into Chapter 2, the Elves. We're done with the Blood War. And, there's the different sections in here. It's a pretty beefy section. And where the Blood Wars was really good section for GMs, I feel like this is a great section for players.
I would agree. If you are interested in playing elves or you really like elves, this section is going to give you pretty much a walkthrough about the mindset of your elven character and the things that they kind of had to go through in their life before they become an adventurer, or even why they would become an adventurer.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get, it breaks down into a bunch of different sections. So, a race divided, the Elven dystopia, living in reverie, elves outlook, elves and magic, the Seldarane, which is their deities, their gods, Eladrin and the Feywild, Drow, the Raven Queen and the Shardakai, and elf subraces, and then we have some fun tables after that.
So, the race divided, it gives you the backstory of Corellon, their main deity, and how all their deities came to be, what the split was with Lolth. As Dave says, you get into the different sections later on about who their gods are. Living in Reverie is kind of more about the lifestyle of an elf, and it goes through what the Reverie is and how it really relates to them as in their life. So that when they're a young child, they haven't lived enough life to really get their life memories through Reverie. So they're tending to get that soul that they've been reborn as, some of their memories. And they're not supposed to talk about it with adults. They're only supposed to discuss it with other kids first. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's each stage of reverie for an elf. It kind of dictates where they are that in their life, whether they're basically a child, their adolescence, adulthood, elders, that kind of thing. So that kind of plays into it, which is going to be interesting as far as role playing your character. Like if you look at that and you can kind of look at your character through the lens of, well, where they are at, or where are they in their life right now, and how would that translate to reverie and the kind of things that they reflect upon. There's quite a few interesting things in here. Like we briefly talked about the divide and the D Corellon Lorithian. I haven't seen him put forth like this before. It's much different. Where they kind of describe him as this ever flowing, changing being, and at first it was just him. Until he gains the attention of Grumsh One Eye, and there's a conflict between him and Corellon gets cut in that conflict, and he bleeds, and that's where elves came from, his blood, and then he chose certain ones and he raised them up to become deities, which I found really interesting. And then among those deities, one of them was Lolth, and said, "Hey, you know what? We could rule the cosmos and do so much better if we would just focus a little bit."
Right. And she wound up raising some of the the elves, the non-deific ones, into her belief, and some of them to this day feel tricked, and some of them to this day are totally on board with what she did.
But it totally shaped the elven race.
It totally shaped the elven race, and it wound up creating this divide. And Corellon is like, "Nope, that's it. You're done. You're out of here. Take your spawn with you. I want nothing to do with any of you." And that's where we get Drow.
Well, and not only that too, it also flavors his view of the elves too. He's not, he's not in love with the elves. He's kind of pissed at them still. It's like, until you guys get rid of Lolth, you're stuck the way you are.
Yep. So they were like him, as fluid and being able to essentially shapeshift whenever, and it's like, nope, you can't do that anymore. Once you get rid of this bitch, then we'll talk.
So yeah, so essentially that's like the split, and then it kind of goes in to discuss also like the different faction of elves, Ladrin and the Feywild. We also get the Shardakai and the Drow, and then like all your kind of like prime material elves kind of all get lumped together. Whether you're high elf, whether you're a wood elf, whether you're a sea elf, they all kind of like follow the same kind of rules. It's just the Drow and the Shardakai and even the Ladrin are vastly different.
So do we want to get into the stats of it, or do we want to do more on the you know what these sections talk about more in depth?
I think we can like touch on them a little bit. Like one of the things in here that was kind of interesting is, you know, elves and kind of like their gender and sexuality. Basically they talk about some elves can just change it from day to day. Like and it's something you discuss with your GM after a long rest. If you just want to change your gender, you kind of can.
Some elves are just that they have that more androgynous look, and they've got the ability to change. Some priests of Krellin are just like that, and others that aren't priests can have that ability too. And you just look at it, or get GM approval to make it happen.
They talk about different things like why the elves have such a long view on things, why they're so good at being wizards, which is kind of like really obvious anyway. It's like, well, they live a long time, so they can kind of like study for a long time, which makes them better at their craft.
I like the section on crime and punishment where elves having such a long lifespan, the material isn't something that's so important. It's more like memories and things that you like have associated with such that it really gets there. And okay, murder is bad, but I don't want to punish you because you murdered him. Like sometimes like the punishment is like, oh, you murdered him, he was working on this, fine, you now have to work on this, you have to get this done, because that's what you have robbed of this world, of this existence.
Yeah, it speaks to the crime being more against the people that are left behind than the actual victim of the crime itself, which is kind of an interesting view. It partially because the elves look at it this way, that their soul is going to be recycled, and I guess that's something we could touch on too. That's kind of a big deal, is the idea that the elves are constantly recycling souls. So that's an even bigger deal for reverie as well, because early on, like, they don't have any of their other memories that they're drawing upon through trance. So they're actually looking at like other lives.
Yeah, and that was kind of cool. In regards to, I'm going to read a section here. Like, to someone who's stolen something, an item's intrinsic value is secondary, to its historical and sentimental value, which can be considerable. An elf who steals a pouch full of gems would be pitied, but someone who steals a dried flower presented to an elf by her long-gone sister would be seen as a monster and likely exiled from the community. And mind you, exile from the community is the worst possible punishment an elf can give you. It's like, nope, you're gone, you're not allowed back, get out. That's the worst that they can do to you. Like, whoa. Like,
Elf adventurers, there's quite a bit on that, and it goes on to basically say what they value, and it's not so much like slaying monsters, getting loot, and getting treasure. It really describes them as being tourists, right? They want to go around, they want to see as many things as they can, as many sights, meet different people, and this kind of comes into play because later on in life, when they're in reverie, they're going to kind of like relive these moments. And also it talks about them being really good wizards too, because even when they're in trance, they're actually learning and studying and working, not working magic, but working on the theory of magic.
They've got the ability to essentially continue their studies while they're trancing for that 4 hours. So it makes a big difference. But like, because reverie is so important, and it's something that I've never really gone into in regards to role playing elves, and I used to be big fan of elves back in the day, and this guy would attest to that. But elves have a hard time trusting people, because it takes decades for them to be like, oh, that guy's got the potential to be a really good friend. Because when you live 700 plus years, what's a couple decades? It's not that long in comparison. But they're probably going to know whether they like you or not within that first minute.
Yeah, it's just a matter of whether or not they feel like they have enough time to invest in building the relationship the proper way is kind of what it comes down to. There's like a cool section, like going back to the wizard stuff and elves and magic with mythals and blade song. Mythals are these ideas of magics of workings of titanic proportions that takes a lot of study, a lot of powerful mages to be involved with, and it talks about several different examples, so you'll be able to read and see that. So if you wanted to do something in your world with a magical nature bent to it, like elven mythos would be a way to explain it without having to go through the mechanics and find the mechanics that support it. It would just be this titanic ritual that happened sometime in the past.
Yeah, so the next section winds up getting into the Seldarine, which is their deities. And if I counted right, there's 30 of them here, all with their alignments listed, what providence that they would have, the suggested domains, what their symbol could look like. So there's a lot of useful information right there that you can just jump right into. And they only go into some of the more common ones. But they tell you like, oh, well, this domain is in Xanathar's guide. This one is in the Sword Coast Adventures guide. So like, there's ways to be able to get all the information, on those.
Yeah, because there's only half a dozen that they kind of go into.
So those are going to be your, more central deities. And it's cool to be able to have that. And there's some definite inspiration in here for, if you want to create your own deities, or if you want to be like, oh, well, I've got a deity and I want to flesh it out a little bit, well, here's the kind of information that you should have.
So there's a section on Avenador, which is like the Elven homeland where they all came from. It's where they believe all their souls and spirits go back to after they die, and they might spend 10 days there, they might spend 10 years there, they may spend 10 centuries there. Before they get recycled and come back. It also talks about this place as kind of being dangerous to go to because of its ever-shifting nature. But not only that, it becomes addictive. And elves that go there tend to not want to leave. And if you do get one out, if you do manage to drag one away, they're always going to long for that and want to go back. So it becomes like an addiction. Now, kind of bridging the gap to that addiction is a place called Evermeet. Now, we talked about mythals briefly. Well, this place was designed to be a mythal, and that's where they took a portion of Avendar and ripped it out of there and created it for its own place. And, now it's a place that elves kind of seek to try and get to so they can experience that place, the origin of elves, the afterlife of elves without the negative side effects. Now, also interesting, too, I found in the elf section, they talk about other campaign settings, other worlds as well. They mention Kryn. They also mention Eberron, and especially when they're talking about dark elves and Drow, because Kryn doesn't have any. They have dark elves, but they don't have Drow.
Right.
And a dark elf in Kryn is just an elf that's been exiled, like that worst crime we talked about. So there's nothing, but they're still the same kind of elf. If it was a high elf or a wood elf, they're still that. It's just they have the moniker of dark elf because they've been cast out.
When you get into some of the Drow deities, that they talk about in Eberron, they don't have Lolth. They've got, I think it's Volcor, and as opposed to it being a spider, it's a scorpion, and it's a guy, not a girl. So it's a complete twist on the Drow religion. But Volcor is practically unknown in Forgotten Realms,
outside of Eberron.
Outside of Eberron. But if you wanted to take him and totally do Drow differently in your world, you totally could, and be like, oh, well, spiders are the lesser creature to scorpions because they don't have that awesome, cool, stingy tail. But I mean, you could blend and twist, and make your own bastardization of Volcor and Lolth together.
Now, after Evermeet, it goes into the Eladrin and the Feywild, and so the Eladrin are kind of even haughtier than normal elves, and they kind of look down on them a little bit because of the nature of where they're from, and because they being from the Feywild makes them much closer to the ancestral homeland of Avendor than any place else.
So they look at it as like, well, we're closer to our god. We weren't cast out like you were. We're proper elves. So it's
Well, no, they were still cast out. They were all cast out.
yeah, but I think that's their opinion of it is like they think that they're that much closer. They're that much better.
So when we get into the Drow section, we actually get several pages worth of just Drow information. There's the Drow, there's reflections of Lolth, society of blood and poison, cities without sunlight, rule of matriarchs, nocturnal raiders, and it goes into one of the facts that the Drow, their souls don't get recycled the way the way other elves do. As a matter of fact, they don't actually know exactly where they come from. They don't know if when Drow die, if they actually turn into the Yokoloths. No, not Yokoloths. Yokels. Yeah, the handmaidens of Lolth, or not. So that part is unclear. So it goes a little bit into their society and about them.
You get a cool sidebar for Formians and Driders, the lowliest of the low.
You get the Dark Saldarine, which is basically all the Drow deities.
And you get even Elistri, who is a moon goddess of the Drow. So the Drow matriarchs hide that information from their children so that
they don't get any ideas.
They don't get any ideas, and they don't be like, So like they're taught, if you go to the surface and you see the moon, run. Like it's a bad thing.
Right, or if you hear music that's appealing to you, you should probably run.
Yeah, because the priestess of Elistri, they sing, they dance, and they play music in the moonlight. That's how they worship.
So after the Drow deity section, you then have the Demon Web connection, Drow renegades, Yokoloths, as we mentioned, and they're one of the things that kind of keep Drow on their best behavior because they can look like Drow females, and you never know in a Drow city if you're actually dealing with a Drow or one of the handmaidens of Lolth. So one must always wonder where they stand with things.
You got to be careful. So the next section you get into the Raven Queen and the Nerdarchy. And I never know if I'm pronouncing that right, so you guys will probably in the chat correct me if in the comments if we're saying it right or not.
I found this section actually the most interesting because this is actually newer lore, and it's lore that I knew the least about.
So I thought the coolest thing was the Fortress of Memories, and with the Raven Queen, being in the Shadow Realm, the Shadow Plane, Shadowfell, call it what you will. She has built this fortress of, collected items and memories and things, and everything, that's there is technically going to be at some point in time, intangible as it fades in and out of existence. And there's a sidebar about Vecna wanting to take this place over so that he can use this to be able to have all the knowledge that she does. I thought that part was awesome.
I actually really enjoyed kind of the origin story, where she was just one of the elves that were originally created, one of the divine elves, that kind of the way they describe it made me think of someone that was trying to mediate between Lolth and Corellian and try and bring it back a little bit and even things out, which all it really did was get them both pissed at her. So she was kind of cast out into the Shadowfell, ends up being destroyed, then coming back. So there is some interesting ties to, I guess, reanimation or undeath there, but not quite. It's not quite like a not like a lich or vampire. So it was just kind of interesting, and it was just definitely a darker aspect because Nerdarchy, however you want to say that, originally were not elves. They might have been fae, but they definitely were not elves. They were creatures of the Shadowfell or the demiplane of Shadow even before that.
Right.
So they got a little bit of a re-envision,
upgrade, downgrade, call it what you will.
The introduction, and I found this to be one of the interesting monsters in the book because I think they might be one of the very few new monsters in the book, and that was the Nagpas. And they were the original wizards that caused the Raven Queen to actually kind of get killed, right, before she came back and raised up as divinity. But she cursed them into these like vulture-like creatures, which seemed like they would make great villains for an overarching campaign.
So you get into the Raven Queen's influence, servants of the Queen. I just thought there's a lot of great stuff here. Encountering the Queen, encountering the Raven Queen. If you go into her domain, there's a good chance that you're going to be there. Many daring individuals are adventurers who know the Raven Queen's terrifying power, yet nevertheless travel to the Shadowfell to undergo her trial, letting the secrets of their souls be unfolded and revealed. So that gives you several reasons why you might want to go there. You might want to free, you or somebody from the dark and terrible past. You could try to be looking for some kind of dark secret. You could be seeking answers that only the Raven Queen might know. There's more things that you could do beyond those three, but those are just, simple things that, like, all right, are you going to brave the Shadowfell and go into the Raven Queen's domain, just to seek out this thing? I think that could be pretty awesome.
It's also kind of cool and funny that like they're not like the vote's out. They haven't decided if there's a method to her madness or she's just mad. So she's very enigmatic that way, and so sages are still kind of debating on this. Like I said, this was a great section. The Shadowkai are fanatical in their service to her, so that can make for an interesting role playing opportunity from the PC side or from an NPC side. So there's ways you could use this in your game. So all in all, this is a good section if you're going to be playing an elf in a game to read and take away what you will to incorporate into your role playing.
There's more than enough material here that if you were looking to run an all elf game or an elf heavy game, like you could just lean heavily on the information that's presented here. And I'm certain, if you're anything like me, you're going to be heavily inspired by what's here to come up with some amazing material.
Now that brings us to the actual Elven subraces.
So we get the Eladrin, the Sea Elf, and the Shadowkai, all of which were presented before in a couple of Unearthed Arcanas.
Yes, so we've seen them all before, but things have changed a little bit. Again, we start off with the Eladrin, and they're based off of seasons essentially. And you can pick and choose, and you can switch back and forth between them. You can be one all the time, or you might change from day to day or due to circumstances. But basically, after a long rest, you get to pick which season you're in.
So I think this is one of the coolest things that I've seen as a race option. It's not amazingly powerful in any way, but all of them, offer personality ideas, so you could literally change your personality based on necessity or on a whim if you wanted to just roll randomly. And let's face it, we all have D4s, we can easily do this.
And each season has personality traits and flaws,
right,
with the random tables like Ted was saying.
So you're gonna get +1 to charisma. You're going to get a phase step, which is essentially a little mini teleport. You can go 30
Misty
feet.
step, essentially.
Resets on a short or a long rest. And, when you reach 3rd level, you gain an additional effect based off of what season that you're in, which is really cool and vastly different than what they had before. Where they get a charisma now, before it used to be intelligence. So there wasn't a huge leap of a difference between High Elves and Eladrin when it comes to that regards. And before, instead of getting these cool face step abilities, you used to just get a cantrip. So always being able to do these cantrips, not as cool in my opinion as these face step abilities.
I'm a little torn, because you're gonna get limited uses on this, so in some ways it's probably slightly less powerful than it was.
Yeah,
but more interesting.
I would agree with that, but I would opt for the more interesting personally.
So when you use your face step at 3rd level, if you're in the autumn, immediately after you use your face step, up to 2 creatures of your choice that you can see within 10 feet of you must succeed a wisdom saving throw or be charmed for 1 minute or until your companions deal any damage to it.
if you go with winter, your face step, when you use your face step, one creature of your choice that you can see within 5 feet before you teleported must succeed on a wisdom or be frightened of you until the end of your next turn.
Spring, we get when you use your face step, you can touch one willing creature within 5 feet of you. That creature then teleports instead of you, appearing in an unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within 30 feet of you.
I think that one's really amazing because you'd be like, "Oh, dude, this this person's injured really bad. Boop, you're behind me.
Get out of here!" Or here, let's throw the barbarian into the middle of them all and see what happens. It'll be fun.
Summer, immediately after you use your face step, each creature within 5 feet of you takes fire damage equal to your charisma modifier. So here you can teleport right into the sun of the bad guys and
Mini Nova them.
Mini Nova. So not bad all around. I think they're cooler than the cantrips, but as you said, less powerful. Sea Elf, which was in the Elf subraces Unearthed Arcana. This is literally just word for word exactly what you saw there. So con up by 1, you get proficiency with spears, trident, light crossbow, and net. You get a swim speed of 30 feet, and you can breathe both air and water. You can, using gestures and sounds, you can communicate simple ideas with beasts that have an innate swimming speed, and you can read, write, and speak Aquan. And I'm assuming, since it's a subrace, it's going to go in addition to your Elven and Common that you'd get by your base race.
Then that brings us to Nerdarchy, however you say that. And you're going to get an ability to increase the Constitution. You're going to get resistance to necrotic damage and Blessing of the Raven Queen. How is this
All right.
pair up to Unearthed Arcana?
So, take everything that was in the Unearthed Arcana and throw it away. Because here you're getting con, where before you used to get charisma. You used to get a cantrip of your choice between Chill Touch, Spare the Dying, or Thaumaturgy. And let me tell you, there's enough differences there that you could have a lot of fun with it, but nope, now you're getting necrotic resistance. You still have Blessing of the Raven Queen, but it's different than what it was before, because it used to be 15 feet, now it's 30. This one resets on a long rest. This one used to reset on a short or long rest, and when you used it, that's when you would gain resistance to damage as you take on a ghostly appearance. So you still get the resistance to damage, but you have to wait until you get to 3rd level.
Yeah, the way it reads now is Blessing of the Raven Queen. It's a bonus action. You can magically teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. Once you use this trait, you can't do it again until you finish a short or long rest. Starting at 3rd level, you can also gain resistance to all damage when you teleport using this trait. The resistance lasts until the start of your next turn. During that time, you appear ghostly and translucent.
Right. So, but it's until you finish a long rest.
Yes.
Okay, but you said short or long.
Did I say that?
You did.
Okay.
But it's cool. So it's I think it's still good. I might have preferred the cantrip over resistance to necrotic damage, but first time I'm in battle with something that's swinging heavy necrotic, because there's some big powerful punchers out there with that. I might be willing to chuck a cantrip for it.
Yeah, and you might actually find some of them in this book for sure. So that brings us to more tables. We actually get we get like a page of tables, pretty much, just a little bit better than a page of tables, and we get Elven trinkets. We also get Elf non-Drow adventure story hooks, and we get Drow adventure story hooks.
You also get Drow house speciality. So, like, whether you're good at making adamantium weapons, your house is full of assassins, you breed giant spiders subject to magical control, you make hallucinogenic substances, high status slaves and sacrificial victims, and it goes on. I thought these charts were pretty darn cool. So to me, the coolest thing about these charts is the Elven trinkets. They're really like little minor magic items, little common magic items that don't require attunement, but here they have them listed as trinkets. Like, one of them is like, oh, it's a crystal lens that if you look, anything that you look at it through looks like it's got little glowing motes. I could totally see some shyster who's like, oh, look, I've got this this magic item here. Look at it through my lens. You will see. And totally hawking non-magical gear, but because I've convinced you that this thing allows me to detect magic, ta-da! You can have a lot of fun with stuff like this, and that's just one of the options that's here.
Yeah, another one is a silver top that'll just spin indefinitely until you interrupt it. So just some cool flavor things. Definitely worth checking out. Question is, are you guys using Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes? If you are, what are your favorite parts? Tell us about it. We got a place for it down in the comments. While you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
If you don't have your copy yet, you can check out the description and get that link. Go to Amazon and get your own.
So until next time.
Stay nerdy.